Purpose of today's session, a little bit different from what we've done before, is really to have a panel discussion and some breakout groups around work-life balance. What does that mean to us? And I think the interesting thing is, and this came out of a conversation Anthea and I had actually, is genuinely it means something different to everybody. There's no right or wrong answers here, but it's interesting to get different people's perspective and how what works for them, what works for them, and how we might maybe learn from each other and give each other some feedback and some detail around that. So really looking forward to hearing the panel discussion led by Jen later. To that aim, it would be useful just for the panel to introduce themselves, if that's all right. So if I shout out name by name and you could just give us a little bit brief kind of update on who you are, that'd be great. Catherine, could I start with you?
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Castillo Soto. I work for Travis Perkins in our managed services part of the business, and I'm business development director. So very similar types of things that Maxine just talked about.
Superb. Thanks, Catherine. Rebecca? You're on mute, Rebecca. Sorry.
Sorry. So I'm Rebecca Hughes. I'm the marketing director at Talisay. I've been within the industry about 13 years now, mainly supplier side, had a very brief stint in merchant world.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rebecca. Joy?
Hi, so I'm Joy Naylor. A little bit different. I head up manufacturing operations for Eurocell. So that involves everything from our recycling, extrusion, secondary operations, right through when it gets into the warehouse or into the branch. So I've been here for 9 months now, but I've been in the construction industry for around 5 years in total. Previously, I worked for Geldwin again in manufacturing, and I live and breathe manufacturing for 25 years. So I think it's really good to have those different dynamics today.
Absolutely. That's superb, isn't it, that we've got different people from across different types of both organisations and roles. So thank you, Joy. And lastly, Nikki.
Hi, I'm Nikki Harvey. I am procurement director at Bristan Group. I've been with Bristan just a little under a year now, but I have been in the industry for probably about 12 years, because I was previously with Assa Abloy in architectural ironmongery. And yeah, that's
superb. Thank you, Nikki. So welcome to our panel, everybody, and thank you very much to the panelists for agreeing to join us and have a good discussion through this work-life balance topic through the course of this session today. Anthea, if we could just move the slides along for me then, thank you. So just a bit of housekeeping then. If you can turn your microphone off unless you're talking, sharing a thought or a question, just because there's a lot of people on the call, that'd be really useful. Raise a hand if you have got a question or a thought, please do. This is all of your session, not just those like myself talking at the moment. If you're not familiar with Google, then at the bottom of your screen there'll be a little hand emoji. If you press that, then your hand will come up on the screen. During the panel discussion, if you turn your camera off, then we can actually see the panelists and Jen talking through. That would be really useful. Thank you. If you've got any questions at all through the panel, then please put the questions in the chat. You'll see a little square box. I hope that doesn't sound patronising. I'll teach my grandmother to suck eggs. We're a Google company and none of my customers know how to use it, so I'm forever describing it to people. But in the bottom corner, right-hand corner of your screen, you'll have a little square box. If you click in that, then you can always pop a question in the chat there. And I'm hoping that it's okay with everybody. The session will be recorded and we'll share it afterwards, but the breakout discussions, in case there's anything sensitive that people want to share that's private to them, they will be taken out, edited out of the video. Hopefully that's all okay with everybody. Please shout if there's anything in there that isn't. And then if we could just move along, that's brilliant, Anthea, thank you. So look, let's just shape the topic. Why is it important? 46% of women in construction lack access to flexible work options, and 45% feel really uncomfortable requesting schedule adjustments for family matters. That affects so many people that it feels like it's something worth talking about and worth tackling. 66% of UK employees feel absolutely powerless to manage their work-life balance, with many unable to disconnect outside of working hours. And I bet you there's a fair few on this call that probably put themselves in that category. 64% of UK employees feel pressurised to remain contactable via digital devices after hours. These brilliant things have probably made all our lives slightly harder. Luckily or unluckily, I'm old enough to remember a time when you called into a phone box to phone the office once a day if you needed something. Nowadays, it's constant, and that means it's constant out of hours as well. 88% of UK employees have experienced burnout in the last couple of years, and 28% believe poor work-life balance absolutely reduces their productivity. So for all of our businesses, if people have a reduction in productivity, that really impacts us and our overall performance. So again, starting to talk and address some of these things feels like an important thing to do. And 82% of UK workers don't take a full lunch break. 2/3 eat at their desk most days. And if you're anything like me, often I get to the end of the day and think, oh, I forgot to eat. So not getting out, getting some fresh air, making sure that we do give each other the right to have breaks through the day also feels like an important thing to tackle. So that's why we felt, as the CIC and as a part of Elevate Women's Network, that this was really quite an important topic to start discussing. And so I hope the fact that you've all joined today means that you agree. Okay. Thank you. So that's us. In terms of the agenda, we've done the welcome and introductions. We are going to conduct a couple of live polls. This will be interesting. Anthea's brilliantly in charge of the technology. So we'll move into that in a minute. We're then going to have our first breakout discussion before Jen leads us into the panel discussion. A bit of question and answers about that panel discussion before a second breakout, time allowing, but we might need to be a bit flexible about that. We're certainly not going to curtail any good conversation through the panel, and then some key takeaway and actions before we leave today. So I think, Anthea, over to you.
Right, you're over to me. Right, so we are doing an experiment today with Google Polls. So you're going to have to bear with us while we do it. So, so my instruction in a minute, there's 3 questions, and what I'm going to just do is show you what the questions are before I put the polls live. So we're going to ask you 3 questions, and we're going to ask you to vote. So the first question is, what's your biggest challenge in maintaining work-life balance? We'd like you to, and I actually have no idea whether you can tick more than one option, but if it only allows you to tick one option, tick your first option. If you want to tick more than one option, it allows you to, feel free to do that. So in a minute, that's the first question. The second question, and then, is, does your workplace actively support work-life balance? And again, select your answer when I load the poll. And the third question is, what would help you the most in achieving better work-life balance? So those are our 3 questions. I'm going to stop presenting now. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to launch the questions one at a time. And what's going to happen is I'm going to launch the questions. And as I launch the questions, you should get in your bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you should get a little message to say a poll's been launched. And if you click on that, you should be able to get into the poll. If for any reason you can't, again, on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see next to the box with the chat box, you've got 9 dots that says meeting tools. If you click on there and click in, you'll find a poll option in there. You should be able to find the question. So hopefully you'll be able to do it through the little thing that pops up. So when you put your answer in, you click your answer, and then you actually have to tick a button underneath that says press vote. So if you don't press vote, your vote doesn't get submitted. So let's try with the first question. So I'm going to launch the first question, which is your biggest challenge in maintaining work-life balance? So it's saying it's live. Right, people are answering. Right, so we've got 25 votes so far and 46 on the call. So those of you who can use, this is what I don't know, can you see the results of the poll? You guys live, you can, brilliant. I wasn't sure you could see that, fantastic. So what we're going to do in a minute is we're going to put those results back into the slide deck so we can keep them for later on. But for now, we'll come back and look at that in a minute, but looks like mental and physical exhaustion is coming up at the moment is the #1 challenge facing work-life balance. Okay, let me just launch question number 2 now. Do the same thing, vote, and then press vote. Let me launch that for you. Yeah. Got 19 votes, so a few more coming through, hopefully. Right, 32 votes so far. Oh, 34. Okay, so it looks like most companies have do some way to support work-life balance, but there's room for improvement. So okay, we'll record that and get on to the next one. And the last one is what would help you the most. I'm going to launch that one now. Okay, 28 votes, 29 votes.
Well, the technology worked, Anthea. This is
That worked. I wasn't expecting, because you can't practice this by yourself. Even one other person, it doesn't feel like proper practicing. 38 votes. Right. Okay. So Max, can you scroll up and down and see the results? Are you able to see that? Right.
Just have a look across the polls. It's interesting. Yeah. So if we look at poll 1 of 3, then what's your biggest challenge in maintaining work-life balance? The highest, probably somewhat worryingly, but the highest vote was for mental physical exhaustion, fairly swiftly followed by family responsibilities. So I don't know if that's a surprise to anybody. I think, as I say, would feel that that's somewhat of a concerning outcome in terms of absolute exhaustion. Anthea, what's your view? Would you have expected that one to have been as high on the list?
I'm not sure I would have, to be totally honest.
Yeah.
But that's a little bit of a surprise, isn't it?
So I answered that. And I think some of it's not just about work. And I think it's like constantly being on, you know, whether it's home or work. And I think so it's not necessarily like I'm exhausted because of my job, just life.
It's just everything comes at you. Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, I didn't tick that one myself, but actually you can kind of relate with Jen's answer, can't you? You kind of think, you know, just life happens. So, Anthea, what I can't see for some reason is it hasn't given me the answers for polls 2 or 3. So forgive me.
So can you, if I'm scrolling, can you see it now?
No.
Okay, so let me read them out now. So for poll number 2, the question was, does your workplace actively support work-life balance? 13 people said their company had great policies. 23 said somewhat, there's room for improvement. And then we had one person saying not really, and one saying it's a major issue. So the majority are saying that their workplace has a policy, but there's room for improvement.
Yeah, again, room for improvement gives us all an opportunity, doesn't it? We all work in organisations that hopefully we can give some feedback to. Hey, Hayley, have you got a point on that one? You are on mute, Hayley. I don't know if you realise that.
Sorry, something cropped up on my screen that covered my mute button, so I couldn't get to it. Sorry. So I'm in HR, so I actually think we have great policies at Bristan, but what we don't do very well, so that's that improvement bit, is like that communication piece. I think when people ask for it, like they pretty much get what they want, but actually do we really, really encourage it? Probably not.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? And I often wonder whether sometimes it's not, companies don't broadly communicate, to your point, whereas on a one-to-one basis, people find it easier to have those conversations. I have a guy who works for me who's a particular religion, and therefore asked very clearly at interview if he could have an hour or so on a Friday morning where he wasn't at work because he had a duty within his church. And absolutely, of course, I know that he works very hard and it maximises productivity the rest of the time. It was never an option. That isn't a communicated policy of any sort whatsoever. It's just a one-to-one chat. So maybe there's a bit of a balance we could find as organisations in what we outwardly communicate to people. Maybe could be better.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point, Hayley. Thank you. Jen, what about the third poll?
Shall I look at the third poll? So the third poll was what would help you most in achieving better work-life balance. So we've got 19 votes for setting clearer boundaries, 12 votes for flexible working arrangements, and then 6 votes for better leadership support and 2 votes for more workplace wellness initiatives. So yes, setting clearer boundaries seems to be the number one.
So that's interesting. I don't know if anybody minds who answered the question in that way. Is that about us setting our own boundaries, or is that about the company setting the boundaries? Rebecca, did you answer that one?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to shout out then. For me, it's about me setting boundaries for myself, and I've learned the hard way in the past couple of years. And I'm still not great at it, but it's about me saying, actually, no, I have to be somewhere now, or my son is at home alone. I need to be back within a certain time frame instead of,
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And I wonder whether that confidence in doing so comes a little bit more with experience or confidence in your own role, confidence in your own skin a little bit. I don't know. Catherine.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Maxine. I think it's a little bit of both. Certainly, I've, similar to Rebecca, learned the hard way that often the word no is a really difficult word to say. Again, it's interesting to get other companies' perspectives on it, but some of it does come from the business and those expectations that are on us. In terms of it's tough out there. So everyone wants to do the best and the most. And certainly when it's really hard, sort of keeping that balance, I think, is really tricky.
Yeah, and I don't want to cut into anything that we might cover off in the panel discussion, actually, but I wonder that setting your own boundaries, etc., whether women feel like they almost don't have as much right, whether you almost don't want to be the mum that says, I've got to be at home with the children, whereas actually some of our male colleagues don't feel that pressure so much. I don't know. Maybe that's something we'll open up as the afternoon progresses.
I think it links back to one of the earlier questions, that kind of mental load. I think there's been lots of stuff published about that recently, about we naturally seem to carry more of that, whether that's right or wrong. You could get into whole debates, but we sort of have that additional, and I think that's then playing into that mental exhaustion piece. The things are very, very linked.
I think they are, absolutely. Thanks, Catherine. Joy.
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting because I run operations that are 24/7. So very quickly you have to learn about those boundaries because you can't be available 100% of the time. And most of it is my own expectation of myself that I need to be available. And once you start to put those in place, I think you have to put those like almost processes in, because it becomes an expectation that you're there all the time. And then people don't take accountability, and then they rely on you to make those decisions and jump in and support. And over the last sort of few months, by doing that, my team are so much more capable and more efficient and more effective, rather than thinking, oh, I've got to ring Joy and, give her these updates. So I think there's real business benefits to putting those boundaries in place, as well as your own personal work-life balance.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And maybe there are some, in terms of all different departments of different businesses learning from each other, maybe that structure of a manufacturing 24/7 operation, there's some learnings in that for people, I don't know, out on the road in sales teams, in my world as an example, that says, no, you still have to set those boundaries. Just because it's a little bit more fluid doesn't mean they shouldn't exist. And like you say, absolutely, I 100% agree that you get more from people the more ownership and responsibility you give them, because actually, no, my boundaries are here. I'm not at work at this stage. You need to go and own it in your shift. So yeah, no, it's interesting. Rebecca, sorry, you had your hand. Oh, sorry, Jen, go on.
Oh no, sorry, Rebecca.
I was just going to say about the mental load. I'll be driving to work some mornings, and I'm thinking, was the PE kit in my son's school bag? When's my mum's doctor's appointment for a next blood test? And there's just so many things constantly, and I sometimes think, I'm now divorced, but I think, did he ever think like that driving to work, or was he thinking, I'm going to work and this is what I'm going to do now, and that's it?
Yeah.
Have you thought about your mum's birthday? Have you thought?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a female thing, and I don't want to be disrespectful to men, because I'm sure there's plenty of men that do think about the bigger picture, but I don't know.
a day job on top of social secretary, on top of full-time mum as well as full-time employee, and yeah, no, I
House
get it.
cleaner, cook. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just going to flag that Maureen's put a comment in that I think is really interesting as well, that boundaries are also about how your colleagues respect the word no. And I think there is that, obviously we do have to set our own boundaries, but I think that's a really valid point, that sometimes, even when you do say no, it's not really acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very good point. Okay, thank you. So, well, we survived our first live poll and it actually created some really interesting discussion. So thank you, everybody. We're now going to move into a breakout. So Anthea, maybe we could have the slides back up if that's okay.
Yeah. Let me just get the slides back up, get the right slide up.
Whilst Anthea's doing that, just to explain the kind of process to everybody, obviously it's always difficult before the session to 100% know how many people are going to join and therefore what the breakout groups need to be. But I've no doubt, as she always does, Anthea's done a fantastic job in putting us all into breakout groups. So what will happen in a minute is that we'll go into breakout groups of smaller groups of about 6 people each, I think.
Yep.
And so you'll pop up into your breakout groups. We're going to spend about 15 minutes, if that's okay. A couple of things to discuss. So the first thing is, did anything surprise you from the poll results or that discussion that we just had about the poll results? And then secondly, what is your biggest challenge in maintaining work-life balance? The next 10 minutes or so are just a bit of an opportunity to get some key insights or a view on kind of what was discussed in your group. So I was with Nicola. Well, there was only 2 of us. Nicola and I had a very good chat for 15 minutes. In fact, we even got cut off at the end. We were still talking, but there you are. So, well, can I pick on you, Nicola? Do you mind if I start with you then, as we were together in terms of, I think we had a really good discussion, didn't we, around maybe being our own worst enemy a little bit and always saying yes?
Yeah.
Have you got anything to add from what we chatted about?
No, I think we were talking about culture and how we feel that it's changed over the years, but then we're potentially still our own worst enemies, and we still think that those expectations are on us. So I definitely had worked for a company where work-life balance was just awful and everything was expected of me, and now it's like 35 hours a week, compressed hours, plenty of holiday, and yet I'll still pile it on.
Yeah, and we were talking about the fact that you still do everything that everybody else doesn't want to do, and you're the yes person, aren't you?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that resonated in anybody else's groups. If could we get a hand up from some of the other groups to just have a bit of a chat about what you talked about? Susan? Susan, if you
Sorry, just realised camera and microphone are off. That's not helpful, is it? It did resonate in our group, but I think there's also sort of, everybody is absolutely responsible for their own decisions and what they commit to, but also how much of that are you making with a sort of calculated understanding as to how it's perceived across the business. There was sort of mention as to, well, I do it because I fear that, my career might not progress sufficiently otherwise. So there is still a mix, isn't there, with regards to individual responsibility and company responsibility to be able to demonstrate extrovertly and also, subtly, that how are people able to make those decisions and not fear sort of repercussions, be it, career orientated or otherwise.
Yeah, no, definitely, and absolutely, and I think we touched a little bit on that too, in as much as, did we grow up in this industry in an era where, as a woman in it, you said yes a lot because you had to prove that you could, whereas there was already a perception other people maybe could do that. You needed to prove you could do it, and so therefore you said yes a lot. And actually, was that really the company, or or did the companies have a duty to ensure that people didn't necessarily feel like they had to do absolutely everything in order to prove worth? Don't know, question mark. How much is that? Is the company or individual? I'm not really sure, but thanks, Susan. Jenny.
Our feedback from our breakout. We had a really good conversation actually, but a lot of ours, which led to our challenge, we kind of said our biggest challenge around work-life balance is ourselves, and a lot of us resonated in our group about our people pleaser tendency. So we had a big conversation around that, saying, you know, we're tuned to be people pleasers, which makes it really difficult to then say no. And then Catherine gave us a really good point. So actually the challenge therefore is in how you manage your own expectations. So you want to be the best and like overperforming, excelling, but how do you accept that just lowering that bar slightly is good enough for you? And I think we put a lot, you know, we had a lot of conversation where we were talking about the poll around, you know, a few of us had worked part-time hours, but how much extra we'd put in because we felt we should put that in to not be falling behind and there was we had quite a big conversation around the boundaries bit. A few of us have been trying to work on our own boundaries. So Gemma in our group was saying that she's now goes and because she gets getting interrupted in her lunch break, she goes and sits in her car and she's had to really consciously think about how do I get myself a break away to set those boundaries. And we were saying how conscious it has to be, but how easy it is to slip out of them when
sure.
As well. So that was main. Someone might want to jump if I've missed anything from my group. I think that was the main summary.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jenny. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think look back at COVID times when we're all, certainly I worked at home, and you would get out for your daily walk because that's what you were allowed to do. How many of us now do that? Probably everybody slips back and goes, well, no, I don't. I just sit in front of this screen all day. I don't go anywhere, and yet now I'm allowed to. It's just you do have to force yourself to keep good habits, don't you? And that's quite challenging in itself.
Yeah, that was another thing actually. Leanne said that whole blend between now you're working from home, how easy it is to get your cup of tea at 7:30 in the morning and just start working, and then before you know it, it's 11 and you've already given 2 extra hours and stuff. So
yeah, no, for sure.
As well.
Jen, did you have a comment?
Yeah, we had some really interesting conversation in our group. So lots of that definitely resonates. We talked about sort of quite a few people being initially surprised by the mental exhaustion being high, but some interesting points came out around can you social battery sometimes being done as well. You know, if you're slightly introverted after a day at work as well, you just don't want to function anymore. And a really interesting conversation around actually how menopause impacts on that as well, actually, which again is obviously, you know, a female thing, although we did learn there's a male menopause as well. Boundaries are definitely a thing, and actually we talked around flexible working and actually how in a branch environment or where you're in a team of 1 or 2, actually that flexibility is so much harder because if you're not there, the work just doesn't get done. So it's different depending on role and area of business as well, I think.
Yeah, very much so. That is interesting, isn't it? You go back to the 24/7 production line where everybody's probably got a role compared to one of our branches as an example that might have 3 people in it one day and one's off sick, and then actually where's your flexibility then because there's 2 people that have got to run the place. So interesting. Sarah.
Hello. So I was in the breakout of Nikki and we answered very, very similar. And I was saying about the questions, it wasn't necessarily about like the poll. It was great. I've got a really healthy work-life balance, but I think it's more of the shame of other people ringing you. So it's like for my brain to work correctly or to gain more energy or recharge, as I like to call it, I often have an afternoon walk, which I'll walk, I'll answer my emails, I'll answer my calls. But if somebody rings me during that, I almost get this shame and embarrassment. And I don't want to say, oh, I'm out walking. But I said to my manager, I'm like, oh, Glenn, I'm just letting you know I'm out walking, but I'm still working. And he's like, I don't care. I know that you're active. And he'll ring me and often I'll say, hiya. And he'll go, hiya. He's like, you're out walking? I'm like, yeah, I'm out walking because I've done maybe 8 hours of work in the space of 4 hours. And then that's me recharging. But if other team members from different places call, I'll often lie and say I'm just walking back to my car. Because I don't want the shame of saying I'm out walking. And so it's when I clicked on it, I can't remember the one, but it's more of the culture. When I clicked on that poll, I didn't mean the culture that's been set that is there. It's more of the culture of the shame of somebody else ringing or the shame of that. And I think me and Nikki had the same opinions on it. I think me and Nikki are really healthy. really healthy work-life balance where
Yeah, that's
like I might do that, and then I might get an email and I'll have a burst of energy late at night and I'll go, oh, I'm just going to reach out to this person on LinkedIn. I'm just going to do this. And it works so well, but explaining that to somebody that doesn't have a same work-life balance, it is almost shameful.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because somebody else would find answering that email or LinkedIn post really late at night not okay, and yet for you it's okay. But your boundary is, yeah, but I need to get out and do this at the point in the day where I need a recharge. And so kind of goes back to the fact that it's different for everybody, isn't it? But yeah, that shame piece is. I wonder whether that's actually whether that's something we put on ourselves rather than other people put on us. But yeah, I can totally understand it. You feel like you shouldn't be somewhere. It's almost like I've been caught, where actually it's totally fine. You're probably working more hours than you ever should anyway. But thank you, Sarah. Hayley.
We talked about that ability to switch off. So it started with kind of being on holiday, and we talked about like at Christmas and the shutdown. Actually, nobody emails you because everybody's off, and that's brilliant. And then linked to what Jenny was saying earlier about kind of that working from home and not leaving your computer. When you go to the office, no matter how long your journey is, it might be 10 minutes, it might be 3 hours, but you kind of have a bit of downtime, don't you? That switch off time. And when you're working from home, you don't necessarily have that.
Yeah.
So that's for some of us in the group was a little bit of a challenge. Kind of how do you create that switch off, whether it is going for a walk or whatever it might be. But it's just really easy. When I finish today, I'll be going straight to pick my son up from nursery. Like I won't necessarily have half an hour to myself to read a book or whatever it might be. So and I'm sure there's lots of people in similar situations. So
yeah, and I think the whole working from home thing has given people a very different dynamic in general, hasn't it? And actually different rule sets, different ways of working, different reset of boundaries, and whether we've all got that individually right for ourselves or not, probably a big question mark actually. But thank you, Hayley. Rebecca.
Yeah, I was just saying, I was just thinking, as somebody talked about, it's ourselves imposing these things upon us, and I know I'm my own worst enemy. It's not the place that I work or the boss that I work for at all. But one of the, I think it was Isabel that talked about perceptions of how other people might see her if she asked for some flexibility, or so it's. I think it's all what's up in here. But she said that she has some good advice from her mum about saying don't worry about something until the next day, because if not, you're working all evening, all through the night until you get back to work, because you're still thinking about that issue. And I thought that was a really great way of looking at it from Isabel's mum. So that's nice to hear that.
Yeah, it's look, and I'm taking on that advice from other people that know you and see you and understand your kind of emotional intelligence or the way you operate is important, isn't it? And whether we take that feedback on board or not, I guess is probably different for everybody. But no, thank you, Rebecca. I think I saw a note in the chat. Were you going to say that, Jen?
Yeah, no, I'll leave you to it, Max. Go.
I have a disclosure on my email signature, which I found works really well if I want to want to work out of hours, and it says that there are no expectations of anything out of the other person's working pattern. So I probably read that really badly, Maria, and apologies, but I get what you're saying, which is actually, even if you're working out of hours, you're very clear on your email that the expectation is not that anybody else does the same. And yeah, I completely get that, because sometimes, certainly as a leader of people, you feel like, well, actually, if I'm sending somebody an email at 10 o'clock at night, they're going to feel like the expectation is that I want them to respond to it. And actually, I don't expect anybody to do that. But one thing I keep telling myself I'm going to do, and I don't, and I'm really bad at, is schedule my emails. So even if I send them at 10 o'clock at night, they actually land at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I keep telling myself I'm going to do that, and I never do. And I really must. But that's another way, isn't it, of dealing with that same situation.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's exactly what I do. So if I work at a weekend, I schedule send for everything for a Monday morning, because no matter if you say there's no expectation, just by doing it sets that expectation. And I think it's a really, and it's so easy in Outlook nowadays. The tools are there for us and we need to use those tools. You know, and just to add into that, some of these things around, it's okay to block out focus time and turn off all your notifications. It's okay to not answer your phone. So I quite often leave my phone in another room, or when I go in the factory, I don't take it with me.
Yeah.
because you can't, you know, we talk about multitasking and can men and women not do it? Well, actually, none of us can multitask. So I don't think we should pretend we can, and we should just be really focused on what that thing is that we're doing at that point in time. And by doing that, that allows your team to do those things as well. Because I know if I get a message off my boss at the weekend, even if he says, don't worry about it till Monday, I'm going to worry about it.
Yeah.
And also, I now know I don't need to look at my phone, because I've set those expectations that don't email me or Teams me. If it's urgent, you ring me.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to get a response. And I think those are the boundaries that you have to really sort of work on. Not easy, certainly not easy. And I probably break my own rules sometimes, but they're my top tips.
No, thank you, Joy. That's really useful. So just a last ask if there was any other feedback from the groups. I think we might have come to a natural end.
Yeah, there was just an iteration about the communication piece from a few people in our team. But yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rebecca. Okay, really interesting. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate all your input. So, and Rachel said, I did the scheduling of emails in my last role and had them set out to go on Monday AM. But I'm going to quickly click on it so I can read the end, but got feedback that this was worse for my team, so worth checking in. And look, absolutely, what's right for one isn't right for all, is it? And actually, if the people or the group that we're leaders of maybe react slightly differently, then obviously worth having those open discussions, I guess, and understanding what other people's boundaries are. Brilliant. Thank you all. Very good input. Really appreciated. Jen, could I hand over to you now for our panel discussion?
Thank you very much. Okay, so just as Max said before, if everyone other than the panel could switch their cameras off so we get the panel highlighted, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. So first question, can you share a moment in your career when balancing work and personal life was particularly challenging and how you managed it? So I'll come to Catherine first, if that's okay.
Thanks, Jen. So I thought long and hard about sharing this story, but I decided to because I think when I really thought about it, it was really what sits underneath my passion for others not to end up in a similar situation. So this has been a little cathartic putting this together, so thank you. Counselling midweek. So my eldest son is now 16, so this is where the story goes back to, is when I had him and I was working for a high street brand, BHS, which is sadly no longer with us, owned by a well-known billionaire, who I shall not name. But I was a buyer for them, I was a senior buyer, and worked as a very part of a very female-dominated team. In the homewares, I was actually buying Christmas products at the time. And lots of people had kids, including my buying director. So I took my time off. I took 9 months off, which back then was 6 weeks paid. And the rest of it was on statutory. So again, why I got involved in the family policy stuff at TP. When I came back, I had a lovely maternity, great baby, he's lovely. And I came back to work. I was very keen to come back to work and needed to at that point, just for lots of reasons. And I requested reduced hours. So I requested that I needed to work 5 days, but to do the hours, 30 hours spread across that time, because I was commuting between Northampton and London. Nuts when I think about it now, with the pressure I was putting myself, but that's a whole other story. And I needed to be able to do nursery drop off and pick up, a very logistical focused kind of request. So I had a meeting with the said director, and the HR were in the room, and asked for a trial period of 12 weeks. The response that I got to that was, well, under the policy, we've got to let you do the trial, but I'll tell you now, it's not going to work. Yeah. So I kind of should have known, I really should have known and picked up on the signals. Obviously, I then was trying to make that work. The director at the time made sure that it didn't. There were lots of things that went on, things like she put 7 o'clock in the morning meetings in. We'd have to present to unnamed billionaire once every Friday. We'd have to get in ridiculously early, etc., etc. So lots of things that were very much against that sort of, trying to work around nursery hours. There was no support to get me out the door at 4 o'clock, and to make it home for nursery, and was very much being undermined. Now I know, looking back on that, what all of that was
But I think when you're in the midst of it and you're coming back from mat leave and you're wanting to protect your career, your reputation, etc., I probably put up with far too much. So I was really, really lucky, and I am really lucky. My husband works in the civil service. I cannot tell you how different his experience was. And his boss just basically said, yeah, work flexibly, do what you got to do. But for me personally, there's probably about a 3 or 4 month period after I returned where I've blanked it out. I just don't remember it because I found it incredibly difficult. Eventually I managed to escape. It did feel like that. Very lucky actually to have had some fantastic contacts from previous jobs, and is often the case. Was sort of scooped up by a contact who was like, you can't keep doing this, Catherine, you're a shadow of your former self. Probably took me a number of years to recover from all of that. My confidence took a real battering. I really didn't trust people. And when I went to Curry's PC World, they were fantastic. I had a brilliant boss there. But it took me a long time to sort of almost believe that it could be different. I think that time, the question is, how did I manage it? I don't think I did manage it, frankly. I think I just about survived. But 16 years on, sometimes those experiences are the ones which sort of really, it changed me and changed my thinking on certain things. And, I've certainly used it to sort of say, well, I'm not going to accept that for anyone else to sort of go through that. So it's one of the reasons I'm sort of here today, I suppose. So that's my story. Thanks for allowing me to.
No, thank you for sharing that. I think, it's we talk about it a lot in these sessions, but that importance of women lifting each other up. So actually to hear that it was a female boss that did that for you as well is that bit harder.
That was probably the hardest element of it all. I didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
Should have, because obviously you look back and you go, oh, I did see things before I went on mat leave. I even saw things at my interview.
Right.
I was just about to get married when I interviewed with them. And I was asked the question in the interview about, oh, are you just going to go off and have babies then? I've seen a few red flags. But yes, I think there is a bit in there about trusting your gut. If it doesn't feel right, just because it looks great on your CV, might not be the right thing to do.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. And great to hear actually that what it's done is spur you on to then look at your family policies and get involved at TP. And I think that's such so often something that happens with women as well, isn't it? Kind of you want to do better for those that come after you. Definitely. Thank you very much. Same question to Rebecca, please.
Okay. So I think one of the biggest challenging times for me around work-life balance, and at the time I absolutely didn't see it similar. I'd been with the company for a couple of years, progressed a little bit, and was given the opportunity to support a sister company over in the States. And I was already working 4 days a week. So when I joined, I said, I'm a fairly new mum. I've got childcare, I've got nursery, but I'm hoping to do a 4-day week. And they were brilliant. They said, absolutely. And to be fair, when my son then went to nursery school, my boss at the time said, well, why don't you come in 5 days a week, but do shorter hours so you can do the drops either side? And I was like, that's absolutely fantastic. I absolutely did work when I got home, and I'd still be on my emails and whatnot. And my son he had a line where he'd go, just one more email, Mum. Just one more email. Just one more thing, Mum. And I'd be like, oh God, is that what I'm saying to him? But with this company, I got the opportunity to work in the States, and I said, yeah, I'll absolutely help out. My husband at the time, also in the merchant sector, so his hours within branch were fairly set, so he couldn't do an awful lot with childcare. So sat down with my parents and I said, look, I know you've helped me a little bit, but if I take on this commitment to go to the States, would you help me out a little bit? And they said, yeah. And the agreement was, back to my boss, was, okay, once a quarter is probably something that I can manage. If that's going to be enough for you and the business, then I can absolutely commit to that. Yep, no problem. So I set off exhibitions, sales meetings, customer visits over in the States, personal growth, career experience, phenomenal. And I am very grateful for having that opportunity. But there were instances where I would come back from the States and I'd land back early on a Monday morning, I'd get home, shower, unpack, pick my son up from school, have an evening with him, and be back in the office on the Tuesday. And 2 weekends have just gone past. But that's okay. It's only happening every so often. And then it got to the point where I think there were some weeks where I'd come back, I'd have a fortnight at home, and I'd go back again. It became quite a lot, and it sounded great. And I'm like, airport lounges, when all you see is other people having fun, and you're sat there for work, and you're in hotel rooms, and you're on your own. I still loved it, but it's not as glam as it sounds. But it was being at home in lockdown during COVID, and homeschooling, and I'm definitely not cut out for teaching. I found that out. But I realised how much time I'd spent away from what was meant to be once a quarter became very quickly an awful lot more. And it was because I didn't turn around at all and say, no, I can't do that anymore. And it got to the point, because I didn't want to say no, I thought maybe it's time for a change. And when we all went back into the office, I actually handed my notice in, and it broke my heart because I didn't want to leave, and I loved the company, but I thought I just can't keep doing that. And that was difficult. And I went to some other companies and had different experiences, and I'm actually back with that original company now, because it's where my heart is, and I do love it, and it's a great place. But it was, what I've realised is it's me not ever saying no. And my best friend said to me, what is the worst that is going to happen? And I went, oh, I might lose my job. She went, you're not going to lose your job if you say no, you can't. And the boss even said to me at one point, look, Beck, I know you're going through a difficult time, because I split up from my husband last year, and it was a bit tricky, and I didn't really take much time off. I was like, right, head down, just focus on work and your son, and ignore that. That's not happening. It's okay. And he said to me, I'm just going to keep putting on you, but you have to be the one that says, actually, no, I can't do it. And I'll respect that. Yeah. And actually hearing him say that, I was like, oh, wow, brilliant. I don't always have the nerve to actually say. I've been in a few instances where I've gone, I should have said no. I should have said no, but I'm learning. And it's for me, it's accepting that this is me that has to change this, not relying on somebody else to change it for me.
Yeah. No, thank you very much for sharing. It is back to those themes again, isn't it, of boundaries and self-created pressure and guilt. And
yeah, I feel like I've either been a bad mum or I'll be a bad employee. And
yeah,
like,
we're not good at being kind to ourselves at all. Thank you, Bex. So next question is, the construction industry is known for long hours and tight deadlines. What are some industry specific challenges that you've faced when it comes to work-life balance? So Joy, I'll come to you next, please.
Yeah, so again, it's really interesting, isn't it? I think a lot of the things that really impact me in my role here are about meeting customer expectations. So when we have quality problems or we have a stock out shortage, and understanding the urgency of that, what it means, what we can do, and what the implications are. Because it might be thinking, oh, well, I've got a customer over here, but if I make that change, it's going to affect 10 other customers over here, and how you manage that and how you get your team to manage that. And then some of the other things as well would be around machine breakdowns, major incidents, accidents, all of those escalation pieces. And some weeks it's a lot, you've got all of those things happening all around you. And then it becomes a real thing like, well, where do I start? Where do I stop? And I've stopped calling it, interestingly, work-life balance, because to me, a balance is scales. And with scales, you're always trying to get it equal. And over the last few years, it can never be equal. Sometimes your work has to be, on the top scale, and other times your life becomes on that top scale. And I think we have this word balance in our minds all the time, and it drives the wrong behavior. So I would really recommend and just think, well, what is it that I need to do right now? And it's okay. I'm doing a big board presentation at the moment. So I know the next 6 weeks, I have got to put everything into work. And I loved the point earlier about sharing the load. And, I live on my own. So my load's shared in different ways with friends, with my family, and just those expectations that I'm not going to be replying to those group WhatsApp messages. I've turned off all the notifications, and guys, I'm going to be out of action for this time, but they know I'll be back in those groups. So I think it's about that blend, but it's about knowing where your boundaries are. So there's two sides to it, isn't there? There's the tactical stuff that, even though I'm doing the strategy work, I've still got to manage. And as I said earlier, I think it's about empowering your team. But my top tip is to just, really think about that blended process and think of it in a bigger period rather than, the 24 hours. What does it look like over a quarter or a longer piece of time?
Brilliant, thank you. And you can see from all the reactions that were coming through how much that resonated. Definitely, I love that. Actually, I hadn't thought about it before, but yeah, that constant juggling act of the word balance creates even more pressure in itself, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it just sets that image, doesn't it? And I'm an engineer, so I'm very I like things to be structured and have a framework around it. And it can't, and we've got to be agile, and the world's volatile and uncertain, and all the macroeconomics, and we don't know what's going to happen next. So it's almost coming comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's a hard place to get to, because it's not how it was 10-15 years ago. 9 to 5 is a thing of the past, or whatever those hours are. So be a bit selfish. That's my other top tip. You've got to make it work for you. And it is okay to say no. And I've done a lot of traveling, listening to Rebecca. And actually, what's the worst that can happen? Because you will be okay if you say no and make those reasons there. And we put all that pressure on ourselves. So just think about, what is it right now that's important for you? And it will change. And there'll be different phases about, the other piece that springs to our mind a lot is the different generations that we work with. And I think that's probably a later question about, managing those things. I'm jumping ahead, but try and put yourselves in other people's shoes. And just because that works for you doesn't work for them. And those different generations and how people work have a big impact, which I'm sure we'll come on to later. But it's okay to be selfish and say, no, I'm not doing that, or I don't want to. And that's socially, we talked about our batteries in every area of life. So it's good discussion.
And I think sometimes it's not selfish, actually. It's just putting yourself first. Again, our natural state to say, oh no, but that's being selfish, and it's not. It's that self-care thing again. But you've got to look after yourself. Brilliant. Thank you, Joy.
And I think the last thing in terms of that as well is, you don't have to be perfect every day. We're going to be grumpy. We're going to be tired. We're going to have not slept because of the kids or the dog, or looking after my elderly parents, and all of those things. And it's about accepting in yourself that you might be a bit tetchy and a bit short, or you might have got a lot on, and that's okay too. And that's being kind to yourself then in those circumstances.
Definitely. Brilliant. Thank you. And then same question to Nikki.
So, in terms of industry-specific challenges for me and the roles that I've worked in, so I mentioned earlier that doing this role in more than a decade in Iron Hungary, I've worked with quite a lot of long, complex supply chains, often based overseas, and things that have really impacted me in terms of balance are like managing those time differences, in terms of when meetings need to be scheduled and things like that. Language barriers, I know that might sound like an odd one, but actually it does mean that usually you have to do everything twice, because you have to say it and then you have to write it just to confirm that understanding. So that can be quite impactful on time, and can consume a lot of your brain power, and you come back to that mental exhaustion. Also travel needs. So nothing beats being face to face with suppliers, customers alike. But in terms of needing to have that balance in your life where sometimes you're going to need to travel. I was saying on a call with Sarah earlier, there are some weeks, not that many, but some where my job does look or has looked pretty 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. But then there are other weeks where actually I'll be away for 3 days, and then the other 2 days might look very different indeed, because I need to make sure that I have those boundaries, and I have that kind of balance where I've got a son as well. He's nearly 10, and so just trying to balance that home life with what the needs of the job are at that time. So for me, the challenges of specifically to my role have often been around things like that. And it's getting those boundaries right. And I do think a lot of it does come back to that and how we self-impose. Joy kind of almost semi-stole my line that I always say to everybody, because I always say, actually, I don't like the term work-life balance at all. I just think it's life, and you have, you find. I think maybe for me, trying to stop thinking about it in that way, that it has to be all or one thing or all another, or and what the way that Joy put it, I thought was excellent, and that resonated with me really, really well, because I always try and think of it in that way too.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nikki. And so I obviously know you do this now in terms of, you'll take that time back. So if you have to do something out of hours, you have to travel. Have you always felt comfortable to do that, or is that something?
No, oh goodness. I think that is something that, and I think there was another thing that Sarah and I mentioned when we were chatting in our little breakout session was around this. There is still, and I do think there's less of it now, but it does still exist, where people wear burnout and exhaustion as a badge of honor. You cannot possibly be working hard enough if you are not completely and utterly exhausted. And it's almost like a competition of, oh, I sat at my desk 10 hours yesterday. Oh, I sat at mine 11. And I'm just like, no, guys, it's not a competition as to who is the most exhausted. And if it is, there's something wrong. So I think there really was that pressure, that pressure has existed. And I do think some of it I've created in my own head, but I think it goes back to something that we were talking about earlier on, about having to be kind of prove yourself. And do we as women feel like we've had to work at this? Everyone else works here, but we have to work here to get to the same point.
Definitely. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nikki. Okay, so next up, we're on to kind of some strategies and solutions. So Bex, what practical strategies helped you maintain a balance between work and personal life?
Okay, well, the only things that I have done, and they've been quite recently, have been a result of like my personal situation. I've not done this because I need to do this for me. I love going to the gym. I'm very sporadic with it. As soon as something happens at work and I'm still at my desk, that's it. I haven't got time to go after work, so I don't go. And then I'm grumpy with myself and gets in a spiral, and then I go, well, I may as well drink a bottle of wine now because it doesn't matter. I've not trained. So I thought I need to change some things. So now after work, unless something's pre-booked in, I tend to leave work more or less on time. There might only be one night a week where I'm still in the office late and I'm at home for my son, which is brilliant. And it's given me better quality time with my son. And when he does his hobbies in an evening, that's when I either pick up some emails if there's something that I've missed, etc., etc. But the bit for me in terms of having a balance or being able to achieve things that are good for me and my mental well-being is, I've said, okay, if I really want to go to the gym and I want to feel good about myself, the only way I'm going to do it is to do it before I go to work. So I don't often like it, but as soon as my alarm goes off at 5 o'clock, I go, I know you don't want to get up, Becky, you don't want to get up. I want to roll over, but get out of bed, because in 2 hours you're going to feel brilliant, because you'll have been to the gym, you'll have walked the dog, you'll have come back home, walked your son up, got him ready for school, out the door, and you'll be in work feeling fresh and ready to go. So I don't do it every day, but I'm trying to do it at least 3 days a week now, and it's giving just me a bit of time for me. I was inspired by one of my colleagues who is a young mum of 2, and she says that she gets up 45 minutes before anybody else in the house gets up so that she can go downstairs, have a coffee, have quiet time on her own, and prepare for the day mentally. And I thought, might be something in that. So, and it's forcing me to go to bed a little bit earlier as well. And I'm making myself eat a little bit earlier. So just a little change. I thought is having a bit of a chain reaction in other things. So carving time out of the day, just something for yourself to keep this going is my biggest win over the past couple of months.
Yeah. I love that kind of 5 a.m. reminding future self this is going to be worth it.
Yeah.
It's kind of hit the and I think it's also interesting that you said that kind of trigger for change was not about what was good for you, it was about what was good for your son. And I think so often again we don't think about ourselves. We make change when somebody else needs us to make that change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So I'm coming to Nikki next. So how do you set boundaries between work and personal life, especially in an industry with demanding schedules, as you've just talked to us about?
So I think, some of the boundaries that I've set have become physical ones. So when we I've worked from home now for 5 years, since in either full-time or in part since COVID. I know we all were at one point, and then I went hybrid after that. I actually really struggled with it for quite a long time, that not having that separation. So I know this isn't possible for everybody, but I was lucky enough to create a physical office. My office at home is now Summer House in the garden. So even though I work from home, I do leave the house. I only walk about 15 paces up the garden, but I do leave the house. Now, but even having like your office in a spare room, or just somehow being able to physically separate myself from it at the end of the day has really, really helped me. That's just a very, very personal thing for me. I needed to create something that didn't have me constantly going, oh, I'll just go back and do this bit. And oh, I don't know if I quite answered that right. And just sat on the sofa thinking about it, and it's in arm's length and things like that. So that physical thing was a thing for me. I think I get really great support at home. My husband's absolutely amazing. He's a brilliant husband, father. He's great around the house. He does help me with that with that kind of stuff, and he's helped me in terms of creating boundaries because I quite often sort of say to it, I still have that guilt. So we do have these conversations, but something that he said always sticks in my head. And he said, all that we ask of you, when he says we, means himself and my son, is that when I'm there with them, I'm with them, and I'm not constantly on my phone or look. So do whatever you need to do. We will support you 100% always. But when you're with us, be with us. And that is something that I've really, really kind of gotten used to doing over time. So that's another thing. I mean, I diary my personal time now, and I'm really, really protective over it as well, in terms of I prioritize it just as much as I would my work, in terms of my gym time, my time with my son. Sometimes just walk the dogs around the block at lunchtime. It takes 20 minutes, but it sets a physical boundary between me and work for that 20 minutes. So I'm not at my desk eating and answering an email, when actually what I should be doing is taking the dogs for a walk around the block. So it's just employing those simple little things. It doesn't have to be hours and hours away from your desk so you feel guilty that you're letting work suffer, because we've all got important jobs to do. But I think even if it's just for kind of 10 or 15 minutes to yourself or something, I think for me, a lot of it is using physical tools, diarying time, separating myself from things. That's really worked for me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nikki. I think that physical boundary thing's are really interesting. I've also heard people who will get changed at the end of the day. So work is done, I'm going to get changed, and now I'm into evening time as well. And again, I think your point around being present definitely resonated again, looking at all the responses to that as well. Thank you very much. Okay, and then Joy, I'm coming to you with, have you found that certain roles or companies are better at supporting work-life balance, and what policies or practices have made a difference?
I think it's definitely changed over recent years. I think my roles have always been remote and covering multiple locations. so for me, it's hard to say like those policies, because I was based home working, and then, you know, some factory roles I've had to be there day in, day out. So it's very much role specific within the organisation. I think it's really important that we have policies and procedures, but also I think they could tie us up a little bit. And you can't always apply that same rule for everybody, because of, as we've discussed earlier, the different circumstances that we're in as well. And I think it very much depends on the culture. So you can have all the policies and procedures and everything written down, but that inherent culture of, you know, the presenteeism, the everybody, like that competition, I loved that. You know, it's like, well, I got up at 6 o'clock, well, I got up at 5, and, you know, it just drives those wrong sorts of behaviours. So I haven't got really concrete examples where I think, well, that was a really great company because of this. I think it's the two things together, the company culture, how the leaders at the top portray and manage and lead their teams, aligned with those policies that are there in the background to support and drive that forward. And there's pros and cons to both, isn't there, in terms of how we work and work within those frameworks.
I think what you're saying there around that company culture and that leading by example is so important, because it doesn't matter if you've got a policy saying flexible working's there. If your leadership team are there from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every night, who's going to ask for it? You know, it just doesn't work like that, does it? So.
And to Catherine's point earlier, you know, when she was talking about the challenges that she's had, you can put in those flexible working requests, but those behaviours and how people and leaders treat people within that framework, it can actually be more detrimental. And then you're better off not having it in the first place, because you're opening it up to people saying, oh, look, you can have this, but we don't really mean it. You know, we don't really care. We're just putting that there because, you know, the law says we've got to, and flexible working's a thing, where actually that's not how we do things around here. So that's one of the big challenges I see.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And actually that leads us beautifully on to our final question for Catherine. So senior professionals, or as a senior professional, how do you support and mentor younger women in managing their own work-life balance? Or what do we call it? We're
not going to rebrand it, aren't we? It's because funny, that was going to be one of my points. I fully agree. I don't think balance is it's not really achievable. It'd be nice to think it was, but actually I think you're thinking about, I think Joy said it. And what's interesting is I think quite a lot of what I'm going to cover has probably already been said, but I think it just sort of proves the point. You know, it's very much about thinking about across that longer term horizon. You know, it's whether that's think of it across a week, think of it across a month, or even longer out. Before I do that though, I was just going to pick up on something that Joy said earlier about what's the worst that could happen. In our house, we have the Dr. Pepper test. If anybody remembers the old ad campaign for Dr. Pepper, what's the worst that can happen? I would say that as we've got older and our kids have got older, you know, obviously the sort of the game has changed somewhat, and you know the game of Jeopardy is slightly different to before all that. But yeah, we definitely try and think in those sorts of terms when we're kind of making choices about what we're doing, etc. So I've kind of thought about this from two different angles in terms of how do you support and mentor. I've thought about it first of all as a manager, as a leader of people, and sort of some of the bits that I've learned. And it's interesting, I've got a few people on here who think I've worked for me. They can tell you whether I will live there or not. But you know, for me, it's a lot about sort of swings and roundabouts. You know, I think there is going to be times when you give a bit more. There's going to be times when you take a bit more, and sort of that. I think we've mentioned it already. But how do you get some of that time back if you're being asked to travel, if you're being asked to stay overnight, etc., etc., things like that? How do you sort of challenge yourself to take, you know, be selfish and take a bit of time back? I think as a leader, I think you've got to be thinking about every person's needs are different. You know, and I try and apply this across my whole team, not whether it's, you know, just, you know, for women, but that sort of, we've got to be quite flexible for people in the current world. You know, I have, you know, worked with people who've got family needs, you know, where they're in that sandwich generation, they've got elderly parents to look after as well as, you know, kids, and, you know, sort of we've got to be really quite adaptable. So for me, it comes back to knowing what are the policies that I'm bound by, and the guidelines that often sit alongside it. So you've got the dead rigid policy, but then you've got the guidelines, sort of being really au fait with those, and sort of, you know, I would spend quite a bit of time, you know, checking in with HR just to make sure, I'd like to maybe push something slightly or do something slightly different, just making sure that I'm not going to end up, either personally or corporately in trouble by doing it. So what are the boundaries that you can go to? And actually often people's needs are for a relatively short period of time. Things change so often, as kids get older, as elderly parents, their needs change, etc. I think there's, it can often be just a relatively short period of time that you're putting things in place for teams. And then the other big bit is around, I think we mentioned it about diaries. I can't move unless it's in my diary. And whether that's personal time, tasks, everything, and sort of helping your team manage their time effectively, I think is a really big part of our role as leaders. Because I think someone said it, so you're managing a busy life. Everybody's managing a busy life and there's a lot going on. And then really it's about keeping everything under a really careful watch, talking regularly, what's working, what's not. Is it impacting performance? Is it impacting people's perception? What sort of communication do we need to do to the wider team to help someone make a success of their particular flexible need? And then the other thing I know is try and lead by example, which is hard, but sort of trying to embody that and sort of show that it's okay to do things a little differently. You're still capable and able to be productive. I think as a mentor, which I think is a slightly different relationship because you can afford to be, I think it's a lot around, we talked in our breakout call about sort of challenging that thinking around what does good look like, and being good enough, and sort of really trying to think about what the bar is for your mentor, or your mentee. And certainly I would talk to them a lot about what's really going on. What are their drivers that are really driving them to take on too much, to push themselves so hard that they are potentially going to break themselves, compromise family relationships, etc. Is it money? Is it time? Is it job satisfaction? Is it progression? What is the thing underneath that? And then how do you kind of unpick that slightly to kind of, again, come back to that question of what's good enough? You don't have to be, I absolutely love managing a high-performing team, not going to lie, but there is also that can be very, very demanding for everyone involved. And then the last thing I've written here, it's a bit random, one phone or two. Right, so I have a work phone and a personal phone. Now, in my world, they do kind of blend, and I've had to put my boundaries back in place to go, that's a work one, and but that's kind of where I'm at in my sort of management of things. And sometimes to be flexible, having everything on one phone is actually quite helpful, but that can then accidentally really challenge your boundaries. So there's a bit of going, just constantly keeping things under review of how you're working and what's maybe accidentally getting in your way. Because what served you 2 years ago might not be the right thing now.
Fabulous, thank you. Yeah, I think that kind of that diary management, that leading by example, but also giving permission. I think it was Sarah talked about that shame, wasn't it? So getting rid of that shame. Like, it's okay to put these things in your diary. It's okay to say I'm going for a walk. It's okay to block that time out. I think it's so important.
Yeah.
And actually that point about that sort of personal process and policy and the constantly adapting. Again, really, really important. What's right for us today may not be in the future. Brilliant. Thank you all. Really, really interesting and insightful. And I've written loads of notes myself actually to go and have a think about afterwards. So absolutely brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Max now for questions from the audience.
Thanks, Jen, and thank you to Rebecca, Nikki, Joy, and Catherine. I thought that was really insightful. I too, Jen, have got a pen and a bit of paper and scribbled away throughout, and probably teaching myself a few things. Oh, sorry, you've taught me a few things. I'm just going to do a bit of a check-in on time. So we've got about 25 minutes left. I think I'm just going to throw to the floor to say if there's any questions for the panel. We'd love to hear them, and maybe we could do that, Anthea, for 5-10 minutes. I think then we'll probably have the next breakout as an open discussion just because of time, but because I think it's important to just get to the key takeaways, commitments and closing remarks piece. Is that okay, Anthea, with you?
Yeah, that's fine. I can't see the questions because if I do that I'll lose the breakout group, so
problem.
You can guys, I can't see the chat box, so if I can let you guys manage the chat box, and then we'll be ready to go into breakouts when you're ready.
Yeah, perfect. So I think we had lots of comment actually in the chat box, more than questions. And I think everybody has access to read the comments, and there's some really great stuff in there around some positivity around some of the things that the panel were talking about, which is really great to see. But also some kind of confirmation of, Maureen, invest in time for yourselves, ladies. You'll feel so much better for it. And people talking about having learnt the hard way about some of the stuff that the panel had talked about there. Just beyond the messages in the chat then, has anybody got a specific question that you'd like to ask Nikki, Rebecca, Catherine or Joy? If you have, by all means, stick your hand up and shout out. If there isn't, and we've covered everything through the panel and the comments, and that's absolutely fine. Just give everybody a bit of a last chance to work out Google and stick your hand up if you want to.
So if you haven't, everyone needs to go and read that amazing comment about Catherine.
I think, is it worthy of reading out, Jen? Have you got it?
Go for it, definitely.
So, well, go on. I'm scrolling up furiously.
Okay. So from Maria, gush alert. I can confirm first and second hand that Catherine has applied what she's just said. She's incredibly supportive and leads by example. One of the first people that has said and delivered on, it's not how many hours you do, it's what you do in those hours. She's an amazing leader.
Superb. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Leanne, I think you put your hand up.
I certainly did. Firstly, I just want to say this is my first call, so thank you ever so much for the just the great insight and for everyone's honesty, and hearing such candid experiences is really refreshing. I think for me, we've heard some really, really good things, but what do you think is the best action that we can take away now so that our allies can support us as well? And, what behaviours can we force ourselves to do to, control our timeframes and, not put too much pressure on ourselves?
Thanks, Leanne. Who out of the panel would like to give us an answer? So I think something quite specific there about allies, actually, which is something interesting, because I'm not sure 100% we've talked about that until now. So how can we get allies to support us in our quest, and how do we manage better to implement some of these strategies ourselves?
I think if I just go first, if that's all right on that point. So I think it's about building that transparent relationship with your peers in that leadership team or wherever you are within the organisation, and just trying to understand, get them to understand from your point of view what the challenges are, what you're facing, and have that open two-way dialogue and really challenge and put that healthy tension in. Because I think if we all try and be everything to everybody, then all we end up doing is getting that overwhelm, that mental stress, and it's all comes back to that, how do I prioritize? How do I manage those tasks, and how do I clearly communicate what I can and can't do within those timeframes? And that's not easy. And it's about taking those allies with you on that journey, and always working in a real male-dominated environment. That's been one of my big learning points now, and have that voice, and don't be afraid to stand up and put those views that other people might have across. And I think that action is if you can just lead by that example and enable and give that like psychologically safe environment like we're in today, so other people can feel they can have these discussions and open up that talk, two-way communication, then that's a great start.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joy. Really useful. Nikki, maybe we'll come to you.
Yeah, quite similar, I suppose, but I would say help them to understand your specific needs. We've talked a lot about everybody's needs being slightly different. Don't just assume they're going to know. I think Jen's my line manager. She understands me. She understands my family life and my needs and how I work. And likewise, the lady who works for me, Gemma, she's also on this call. I understand now how she works also, because we've had that open dialogue and we understand each other's needs and how we work and how best we are productive. And I just think that would be my advice, is to get that trust and understanding.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nikki. That's great. And Leanne, thank you for the question. We have 10 minutes remain, 8 minutes remaining. So I'm going to hand over to Jen now for some key takeaways and closing remarks.
Thank you very much. I think just as ever, I've absolutely loved this session, and I think there's something so powerful in all coming together and just every time it's like, oh yeah, we're not on our own. Everyone's experiencing so many of the same things, aren't they? And again, this time, as every time, I'm taking away so many things personally, professionally, as a line manager that I can do differently going forwards as well. You know, if I kind of think about the themes and the things that we've talked about, the things that really stand out to me are, you know, almost without exception, is pressure is self-created. And you know, I think some of that is probably we have a group of, you know, dedicated, ambitious women as part of this group, because you're taking the time to be part of something that is about that personal development as well. But what that means is that boundaries really do matter, and we have got to create, set, live by those boundaries, and there's that sort of personal responsibility, I suppose, of making this better for ourselves where possible. You know, absolutely accept there's lots of circumstances as well where it's on the organisation. I think those themes around that self-care and you know, giving ourselves time and giving ourselves permission is so important. The being present. Absolutely loved blend, not balance, and I'm totally taking that one away. And you know, it is that I had a real wobble a couple of weeks ago because I had so much going on at work and so much going on at home, and I just wasn't coping, if I'm honest. And I had to make a decision to let some of the stuff at home go. And then I went through this whole guilt thing of, well, no, I've worked really hard to have the life that I have. Why am I sacrificing it? And I'm not. I'm just, for a period of time, I'm giving myself a break at home. That's it. And I'll come back to it. And that's why that blend thing really resonates with me, that, you know, in a couple of months' time, I'll prioritize that again. I really liked the kind of diary management and blocking time, whether that's focus time for work, whether that's, you know, I quite often do walk the dogs at lunchtime, but I don't put it in my diary, put it in my personal diary. But actually, why don't I put that in my work one? And it's back to that shame thing, isn't it? You know, I think Sarah said it, and I was like, yeah, I certainly used to do that. I'd be out for a walk, my boss would bring me in, but oh, how am I going to explain this one? It's like, but I'm taking a call on my lunch break. Like, why is that a bad thing as well? And then Nikki, you talked about that communicating with your line manager and your peers and actually helping them to understand your needs, and I haven't thought about that actually in terms of proactively doing that. But again, so important that people understand your world, and we are one person. You know, we're not a different person at work to the person that we are at home, so let's help our team to understand who that person is. And I think, you know, again, we talked about this, but that leading by example, you know, let's get rid of that shame. You know, there've been 45 of us in this room. If we can all go and make 10 people feel like there isn't shame, then actually that really starts to make a difference, I think, which again is what this network is really all about. So I think we are a bit short on time. So we were going to ask you to put a comment in the box, but I think just for everybody's own kind of benefit, you know, if you pick one thing that you're going to go and do differently after today, and then we'd love to hear about it, you know, whether it's at the next meeting or drop us a note or yeah. Max, did you want to chip in?
So reiterate lots and lots of what you said, Jen. We definitely talked in our group about that whole speaking to people about what your needs are. Adele, I'm sure won't mind me saying, in our group, she said that she actually had to go and say, look, I might need some help with this because, and actually the response that she got was fabulous. And I know, Catherine, you talked about a horrible experience that you'd had, but I'd like to think most people are human, and if they understand what is stopping you being as productive as you could be at work because of something that's going on outside of work, that most people would be there to help and support and try and give back a little bit. So we talked about that a lot, and we definitely talked about the being our own worst enemies thing, and how have we got those strategies about your cut-off time. Interesting comment that maybe hasn't already come out today, though, is that we talked about how things change over time and your strategies have to change over time. So if you've got very young children and they absolutely need you between 5 and 8 p.m, then you are in the room with your young children because you've got no choice to be. But actually then, as they get older and your life changes, do you adjust yourself and your own boundaries and your own ways of switching off at different points in the day or evening, because you actually haven't quite got those same draws from the family, and are we really good at adapting as we go through different stages of our lives, was something else that we talked about the strategies on. So maybe something else for us to reflect on. Look, I, as always, have loved today, loved the sessions, and always so very grateful to everybody for their stories, their openness, their honesty, and the commitment to this being a safe environment, to us being able to share our experiences and learn from them. So thank you to all of you, to everyone. Thank you as always to Anthea, who's absolutely brilliant at organising us all, does all the actual hard work. and yeah, I'm sure I speak on behalf of Jen and I to say we look forward to the next session. And if you have any comments or any ideas, this is your forum, your network. If there's anything specific you'd like us to step into in terms of topic areas in the future, please let us know.